The audience on the set of Voices in Debate held their breath. It was a special night. Keanu Reeves, the enigmatic actor known for his humility and depth, was about to be interviewed by James Holloway, the host feared for his incisive and provocative style. The lights shone bright, the cameras were ready, and the air was thick with anticipation. James Holloway walked to the center of the stage with his characteristic confidence. Tall, with perfectly styled silver hair and eyes as sharp as scalpels, he stood before the audience with his arms outstretched. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Voices in Debate," he announced in a voice that filled the studio. Applause followed his words, but it wasn't him causing the stir, it was his guest. "Tonight," Holloway said theatrically, "we are joined by a man who is loved, respected, and deeply reserved. An icon. Someone whose soul I believe has yet to be revealed. That's why he's here." The curtains parted, and Keanu Reeves appeared. He wore a black suit without a tie, his hair loose to his shoulders, and an astonishing calm on his face. But what caught Holloway's attention was something else, a small silver crucifix hanging from his neck. Keanu greeted the audience with a slight smile and sat across from the host. Holloway watched him like a predator studying its prey. "Keanu Reeves," he began, "it's an honor to have you here." "The honor is mine, James," Keanu replied serenely. "Always kind, always mysterious. But today, we're going to explore what no one has managed to see in you." The audience leaned forward. Holloway smirked with mischief, and then he asked it, "That cross around your neck, is it just an accessory, or is it a statement?" Silence. Keanu looked down at the crucifix. He held it between his fingers, and as the world held its breath, a storm was about to break loose. The silence in the studio grew heavy. James Holloway knew what he was doing. This wasn't just a question, it was a provocation, a carefully designed ambush to corner his guest. The camera panned slowly to Keanu, who didn't seem surprised. He took a brief pause, then spoke in his trademark measured tone. "This cross represents something personal to me," he said without raising his voice. Holloway leaned back in his chair with a barely concealed laugh. "Personal? Come on, Keanu, you're a public figure. Everything you wear, everything you show, sends a message. Or do you want us to believe that cross isn't a symbol you're promoting in front of millions?" Uncomfortable laughter rippled through the audience. Holloway grinned like a boxer who thought he'd landed the first decisive blow. "It's 2025, Keanu," the host said sarcastically. "Science has advanced, humanity has evolved, and you, one of the most modern and intelligent actors of our time, still wear an archaic symbol." Keanu remained serene, but his fingers traced the crucifix as if remembering something distant. He didn't seem offended. He didn't seem defeated. He seemed patient. "You say faith is a thing of the past," he finally replied. "But tell me, James, are intelligence and faith mutually exclusive?" Holloway laughed. "How many wars have been fought over that cross? How many atrocities committed in its name?" Keanu looked at him without blinking. "Do you want to talk about history or my necklace?" A collective ooh rose from the audience. Holloway clenched his jaw, but kept his composure. This was his game, and he wasn't about to back down so easily. "Is it a statement?" he pressed. "Yes or no?" Keanu tilted his head thoughtfully. Then he pointed to the expensive watch on Holloway's wrist. "And that watch, is that a statement of yours, James?" The audience erupted in applause. Holloway swallowed hard. Keanu's first counterattack had been launched, elegantly, without shouting, without aggression, but with razor-sharp precision, and the balance had begun to shift. Holloway tried to regain control. He leaned forward, lowering his voice to a more dangerous, direct tone. "All right, Keanu, no more beating around the bush. In a world of science, evolution, and technology, do you really believe that symbol on your chest still has a place?" It was a trap question, a trench from which he planned to fire relentlessly. But Keanu didn't hesitate. "Can I ask you a question first, James?" he said, his voice soft but firm. The host blinked, momentarily thrown off. "Sure, go ahead. What do you think evolution is?" Holloway adjusted in his seat, ready to mock. "Evolution is progress, it's growth. It's leaving behind obsolete beliefs. It's moving toward a world guided by reason." Keanu nodded slowly. "So according to you, evolving means abandoning everything that can't be measured in a lab. If something can't be proven, it's just an idea," Holloway retorted with a smug smile. Keanu looked at him calmly. "What about love?" The audience stirred, sensing the unexpected turn. "Love?" Holloway repeated, confused. "Does it exist?" Keanu asked. "Of course. Have you ever measured it? Put it under a microscope?" The silence was absolute. Holloway was speechless for a few seconds that felt like an eternity. "You're not comparing religion to love," he muttered, forcing a laugh. "I'm not comparing them," Keanu said. "I'm asking if something that can't be proven loses its value." The studio fell completely silent. Keanu's words hung in the air like church bells, steady, clear, impossible to ignore. You talk about faith as a chain, he continued, but for some, it can be a bridge. For me, this cross isn't a shackle, it's a reminder of humility, of compassion, that the world doesn't revolve around me. Holloway tried to interrupt, but Keanu didn't let him. What about you, James? He asked gently. What about me? The host replied, tense. Do you believe in something bigger than yourself? A pause. The blow wasn't struck in anger, it was struck in truth, and the silence that followed was the loudest of the night. The studio remained tomb quiet. James Holloway, who usually had answers ready like bullets, said nothing. His jaw tightened, his eyes once sharp as blades, now avoided direct contact. This isn't about me, he finally said, trying to deflect. Are you sure? Keanu replied with a half smile, because when someone reacts with such rejection toward a symbol, it's usually because that symbol confronts something within themselves. The words struck like lightning. Holloway took a deep breath, barely regaining his composure. He leaned back, crossed his legs, and changed tactics. Fine, let's talk about the symbol. Do you know how many people have suffered under that cross you wear? How many have been condemned, divided, persecuted? You wear that symbol as if it's nothing. Keanu met his gaze without breaking his serenity. You speak as if the cross has a will of its own, as if it's the symbol making decisions. And doesn't it? Doesn't it represent all that too? Holloway shot back. If someone uses a hammer to build a home, Keanu said, and another uses it to break windows, is it the hammer's fault? The audience murmured, clearly struck. Holloway frowned. That's a convenient metaphor. Then let's talk about justice, Keanu continued. Do you believe in justice? Of course. And how many injustices have been committed in its name? The audience began to realize what was happening. Keanu wasn't arguing, he was revealing. He was making James Holloway confront not just him, but himself. And the host's image was cracking, live. James Holloway shifted in his seat. He knew he was losing ground, but he couldn't surrender. His ego, forged in years of won debates, wouldn't allow it. So you're saying faith is innocent, he said sarcastically, that religion bears no blame. Keanu shook his head. I'm saying faith is like fire. It can warm your home, or burn it to the ground, but fire itself isn't good or evil. It depends on how you use it. The audience nodded silently. Some even clapped timidly. Holloway noticed. His discomfort was palpable. So according to you, we shouldn't blame religion, but the people who corrupt it. Exactly, Keanu affirmed. It's easy to blame the symbol. The hard part is admitting that we're the ones who distort it, who turn it into an excuse for hate, when it should be a guide toward love. Holloway exhaled sharply. He couldn't afford to lose. Very poetic, Keanu, but the reality is that millions have suffered because of that symbol on your chest. Keanu looked at him steadily. And millions have also found hope, comfort, and purpose in it. The words weren't offensive, they weren't an attack, but they had an edge, and they were dismantling Holloway with every sentence. Maybe the real question isn't what faith has done, Keanu said, leaning forward, but why it bothers you so much. The audience tensed. No one breathed. The camera caught Holloway's expression. His eyes lost their certainty for the first time. And then it became clear. Keanu Reeves hadn't come to this interview to defend a belief. He had come to show the world what happens when ego faces truth. James Holloway tried to maintain his composure, but his fingers tapped nervously on the armrest. It was a telltale sign for those who could read it. His mask was crumbling. You're skilled, Keanu, he muttered with a forced smile. I'll admit it. You turned the conversation toward me. Very cleverly. Keanu didn't respond with mockery or pride. He just watched in silence. That was worse. There was nothing the ego feared more than a gaze that wouldn't bend. But let's not fool ourselves, Holloway continued. You're here. You wear that cross. You're sending a message, whether you like it or not. Keanu nodded, accepting the statement calmly. And when someone wears a pride flag, he asked, are they sending a message too? Holloway hesitated for a second. That's different, he countered. Why? Keanu said without raising his voice. Because that flag represents inclusion, equality. Exactly. And can't faith represent the same? Keanu asked, now looking at the audience. Or have we decided that spirituality is by default exclusionary? The silence returned. But it wasn't tense anymore. It was reflective. Faith has been used to oppress, Holloway insisted, though with less force. So have governments, ideologies, even science, Keanu replied. Anything with power can be used for good or evil, but we don't destroy science, do we? We perfect it. We regulate it. Why don't we do the same with faith? It was logic few expected, disarming logic, because it didn't attack, it understood, and that was what made Keanu's response so powerful. He didn't need to win the argument, he was winning the audience's soul. James Holloway knew he needed to strike back, not physically of course, but his reputation was on the line, and Keanu was disarming him with something far more dangerous than logic, serenity. Alright, let's leave philosophy aside, Holloway said harshly. Let's speak plainly. Do you really believe that in this modern world, with all the information and advancements we have, people still need faith? Keanu didn't hesitate. Yes, a single syllable, but with the weight of a mountain. Holloway frowned. Why? Keanu took a deep breath, then spoke slowly, as if willing to voice an unpopular truth. Because logic doesn't fill the human soul. A wave of murmurs swept through the
room. We live in an era of digital connection, of science, of instant answers. We can cure diseases, travel to space, know what's happening on the other side of the world in seconds. But more and more people feel empty, lost, anxious. Keanu's voice didn't waver, but it carried a deep sadness. We've answered many questions, but we don't know who we are, or why we're here. And that's where faith, for many, comes in. Not as dogma, not as imposition, but as a whisper reminding us that we're more than flesh and bone. Holloway wanted to interrupt, but he couldn't. The audience was spellbound. For some, faith is frightening. For others, it's the only reason they haven't given up. And suddenly, the cross on Keanu's chest was no longer an accessory. It was a declaration of humanity. That's very romantic, Keanu, Holloway replied, straining to keep the irony in his voice. But some would say religion has done more harm than good. Keanu didn't defend himself. He simply nodded. Some would say that yes. Holloway thought he saw an opening. And what do you tell them? Keanu took a moment. Then with quiet conviction, he answered, I'd tell them that pain isn't exclusive to faith. Humans are imperfect. We make mistakes, sometimes horrible ones. But if we only see the bad, we ignore the good. He paused briefly, letting each word sink in. Compassion, solidarity, forgiveness. These two have been born from faith. The audience was completely silent. This was no longer just an interview. They were witnessing something far greater. Many live by the true spirit of their belief. Keanu continued. And that makes them better people, better parents, better children, better neighbors. Not because faith forces them, but because it inspires them. Holloway was speechless. The audience was too. It was as if everyone was breathing in rhythm with Keanu. And then for the first time it became unmistakably clear. Holloway had lost. Not because he'd been defeated in arguments, but because his intention had been to destroy. And Keanu had only sought to understand. The tension was palpable. James Holloway, the man who had become legendary for cornering his guests, was now silent. He had lost control of the dialogue. And he knew it. Keanu, on the other hand, showed not a hint of pride. His gaze remained serene, humble, as if he wasn't interested in winning, but in opening a door the other refused to see. Holloway leaned forward with a forced smile. So you're telling me we should respect something that's caused so much pain? I'm saying, Keanu replied gently, that we can condemn the acts without condemning the origin, that we can learn from mistakes without renouncing what still holds value. The host shook his head, his tone almost desperate. And what if all this just perpetuates ignorance? What if it's just a way to control people? Keanu narrowed his eyes, not in judgment, but in reflection. And what if it's not? What if, for someone, that symbol isn't a chain, but an anchor that holds them when everything else fails? Holloway clenched his teeth. He searched for something, anything, a crack to exploit. But there were no cracks left. Keanu wouldn't break. Respecting isn't agreeing, James. Keanu continued. It's acknowledging that the other person also feels, also struggles, also has the right to hold on to what gives them meaning. The audience was motionless, hypnotized. And then something unexpected happened. A single clap, then another, and another, until the entire studio rose to its feet. Not for faith, not for the symbol, for truth. Truth spoken with calm, with compassion, with heart. The applause grew, like a wave that started small but rose with unstoppable force. James Holloway, still seated, looked around in confusion. He had never witnessed an ovation like this, directed at someone who wasn't trying to please, convince, or sell an ideology, but simply sharing his truth. Keanu didn't stand. He only bowed his head slightly, thanking them in silence. His humility contrasted with the intensity of the moment. Holloway swallowed hard. He knew what was coming. Headlines, analyses, clips of the video circulating everywhere. And worst of all, he knew that for the first time he wouldn't be the protagonist. He tried to regain control. Clearing his throat, he forced a smile. Well, Keanu, I'll admit I didn't expect this direction for our conversation. Keanu looked at him, without a trace of hostility. Conversations sometimes reveal more than we expect, James. Holloway drummed his fingers on the armrest. His professional mask was slowly returning, but the damage was done. I suppose this is where I thank you for your interesting ideas. I'm not here to lecture, Keanu said, finally standing. I'm just sharing what helps me walk in peace. The audience remained on their feet. Some clapped. Others simply watched, as if they'd just witnessed something deeply transformative. Holloway stayed seated. The camera was still rolling. This interview has been revealing, he murmured. And it had. But not for Keanu. For him, when the show ended, Keanu didn't give interviews. He didn't seek spotlights. He thanked the crew, shook hands with the technicians, and left the studio in silence. A silence that spoke louder than any declaration of victory. As Keanu walked away from the set, the murmurs of the crew faded behind him. Outside, a crowd waited. Reporters, fans, cameras. Questions rained down like gunfire. Keanu, what do you think of the interview? Do you think Holloway was unfair? Are you promoting an ideology with that crucifix? But Keanu didn't respond. He walked with steady steps, unhurried. He wasn't running. His inner peace was evident, even amid the chaos. He got into a car, closed the door, and disappeared into the city lights. That night, social media exploded. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Everyone was talking about the moment, the exchange, the silence, how one man, without raising his voice, had shaken one of television's most feared hosts. Can Keanu wins trended worldwide. Clips of the confrontation went viral. Hundreds of influencers, philosophers, and content creators analyzed every word, every glance. The interview of the year, some said. A masterclass in wisdom, others declared. Meanwhile, James Holloway sat alone in his dressing room, the same place where he'd celebrated so many rhetorical victories. But this time, his reflection in the mirror seemed smaller, more real. He replayed the interview on his tablet, watched his own responses, his gestures, his arrogance, and most importantly, Keanu's face, unshaken, patient, compassionate, a face that didn't need to win, because it already understood something he couldn't yet name. For the first time, James wasn't in control, and that truth, though he wouldn't admit it aloud, changed him forever. 2 days passed without Keanu saying a word about the interview. The world speculated. Would he release a statement? Respond to the analyses, the criticisms, the praise? Then, without warning, Keanu posted a simple message on his social media. We don't need to agree to respect each other. We don't need to believe the same to walk together. Nothing more, but it was enough. Hundreds of thousands shared those words. Comments poured in from around the world. Thank you for this. You restored my faith in dialogue. This isn't about religion. It's about humanity. Even those who didn't share his faith recognized the depth of his message. Because Keanu hadn't spoken of religion as an institution. He'd spoken of conviction, of compassion, of respect, of connection. Meanwhile, James Holloway stayed away from the media. He didn't record new episodes. Deep down, he knew that conversation would mark a before and after in his career. But something had shifted in him too. That night, when his producer asked if he wanted to prepare a new show, Holloway only replied, "Not yet. First, I need to understand why that cross bothered me so much." It was a whisper, barely audible, but it was the beginning of something, the beginning of his own search. Days passed, and the impact of the interview kept growing. More than a TV moment, it had become a symbol of something greater, the possibility of conversing without destroying, of debating without humiliating. In an increasingly polarized society, Keanu had shown that respect isn't weakness, it's a higher form of wisdom. Universities invited Keanu to speak on philosophy, communication, spirituality. Documentaries began forming around the phenomenon. The video amassed millions of views and comments. And yet Keanu didn't ride the wave. He didn't capitalize on the moment. He didn't sell books or start movements. He went on with his life, filming movies, walking the streets, listening, observing, living as he always had, quietly but deeply. A young man stopped him in a cafe and said, "Thank you. My father mocked me for wearing a cross. After your interview, he apologized." Keanu looked at him softly. He didn't say much, just placed a hand on his shoulder and smiled, because he understood that sometimes words aren't what matter. What matters is what they leave behind. A month after the interview, James Holloway did something no one expected. He published an op-ed in a major national newspaper. The title was simple, Keanu's Cross. In it, he recounted his experience with brutal honesty. He admitted his intention to dismantle Keanu, confessed his discomfort, his arrogance, his need to always be right. But the most striking part was how he ended it. "I didn't leave that interview defeated. I left more human, because someone showed me that behind every symbol, there's a story, and behind every belief, a beating heart." The article went viral. And that night, when Holloway made a surprise appearance on a different show, his face serene, his voice quieter than usual, he said, "I think the cross I questioned so much was a mirror." The audience didn't applaud fiercely. They applauded with tenderness, because they understood that Keanu's victory wasn't over Holloway. It was over ego, over prejudice, over the inability to listen, and so ended the story that wasn't a battle but an invitation to see the other, with new eyes.